professional voice.
Do you believe our overall educational system curriculum is the best reflection of what we need to learn in order to prosper in the future? Would you say the average conventional middle school or high school is doing its best to achieve this goal?
No, my biggest problem with it is that it doesn't allow for critical thinking. Just get this information and regurgitate it on a test, not engage in critical thinking, which will allow for them to create ideas, and that when they get to adulthood, they can apply those ideas in whatever job or career they're going to.
Well, this is interesting for me because I've actually taught college and I'm working to teach high school right now. I'm actually taking a course. They need to reform it more to get the students to pay attention and care. Not even just if they're making them learn properly, just make the students care more.
Not enough accountability and too many politicians in there with their hands in it. The state and federal government should have a hand in funding, but it should be left to educators to run and decide what works, because we know standardized testing does not work.
There's not many trade or job programs anymore like there used to be back in the day for people who aren't going to seek higher education but still need to figure out how to survive on the outside. And my biggest gripe with education, especially in high school, is they don't teach you about taxes, getting property, and all this other stuff that you eventually have to learn leaving outside.
My ex in Germany, their school system, she learned all that in like high school, and she was like better prepared for living on her own than I was, and I like went to college, and I think that's a critical skill that they neglect because they put so much emphasis on taking tests, they forget what it's like to teach people to live in the real world.
Yeah, I used to be homeschooled, and I think Thomas is very much right about like you just don't have the interaction as you would in a regular school. It was very kind of lonely. It was great though because I could like learn at my own pace. But homeschool is really for people that are really good at learning by themselves. First of all, that teachers' wages are really low, and that can sometimes
horrifically low.
Yeah, exactly. And it can impact the way they teach kids because some of them just won't care as much as if someone would if they got paid more. But because at a public school, they don't take the time necessary for kids, that might learn auditory or visually. So those kids feel like, well, I can't really excel because I don't understand it. I don't understand how this teacher is explaining it to me. And so they feel the need to drop out because they just are not being taught in a way that they can grasp it.
I don't believe that science and faith are different. I think they're both similar principles of the same ultimate point of discovering what our purpose is and what is existence. Teach everything. If you let the people decide what they should learn, like I don't think you should exclude one or the other or favor one or the other. Just everything's available.
Well, I think there should be more of an emphasis on the arts because it seems like more and more they're eliminating arts, anything that has to do with music. They're just throwing them by the wayside. They're worrying more about, technical stuff, which, yes, is something that we need in the future. But if we don't have arts, like other people mentioned, it's just going to be very just bland, uninteresting children.
Particularly more for me is for inner city populations, more emphasis on the STEM degrees, like science, technology, math, and engineering. I'd like to see more populations, more minority populations get access to that curriculum so that they can be the future, engineers, the future scientists in this 21st century that we're living in.
But I'm actually also going into teaching because I'm like, not everyone can be a filmmaker, and you hear all the stories about starving artists and that stuff. So you got to find some avenue to make it productive if you're going to go into something more, artsy or more abstract like that.
That's true, Justin, but it also follows people tend to spend more on the arts when there's a good economic boom going on. Like you saw in the early 2000s where you had more school projects going with music and bands in school. And then right after the recession, you saw that all that clamped down and more people going towards technical things.
Learn people skills. You have to work, kind of work with people and know that if you're dedicated to one thing, you're going to have to do something to fund that until that takes over as your primary source of income. And that's the problem in our school systems. I think it's not only just schools, it's also parents.
Like teaching kids in K-12 schools to be active in their community, to do volunteer work in their community, to help their fellow man and woman. And I think if we taught kids in K-12 not just education, but also the value of working in your community, working with your fellow neighbors, and helping them on to come up, it creates a better society because you have more aware people that are not just in it for themselves, but also for their fellow human beings.
Another problem with education these days is that when you have a school district that's a good district, and that parents want to send their kids to, if it's kids that are poor on the poorer side, you got the rich people who get together and be like, oh no, we don't want those kids in our school. People were realizing that poorer families were moving to that area simply to send their kids to the better schools. Yeah, and that's perfectly normal. Well, a bunch of rich people found out what was happening, and they decided to talk to their buddies in the city council, and they redrew the district lines.
Yeah.
So you've got kids who have been living in this district and going to this particular district, these schools, pretty much their entire lives, suddenly having to be bused to a poor school in the next county over.
Defunding of public education and what they emphasize when they're teaching you in school. My school barely touched on the civil rights movements and stuff like that. It's a soldier machine. We have an economy that's driven by military contractors and defense contractors, the people who make weapons, and an uneducated lower middle class is the food that feeds the soldier machine. You need uneducated people who don't have a financial security to send their kids to college, so they send their kids into the military because that gives them the promise of a future and a college. They won't even bother getting themselves educated because they're now indoctrinated into this community that now accepts them, and you get a sense of community out of it you don't get in other places.
Jesse, for real though, that was some deep knowledge right there.
Like other people mentioned with the overcrowding in these classrooms, and you get these teachers out of on their last leg, so they don't give a fuck about these kids much more. You get these new teachers coming in trying to fuck them, so advantage.
Yeah, for real. Yeah, you got that point.
That's a good point.
Gerald speaking the real truth.
Exactly.
If only I could understand what he's saying.
Yeah.